Buen dia. Hi, welcome back. My name is Al Simon Jr. and welcome back to Single Black Man from Des Moines. A little about me: I was a dog handler in the service. I've worked in retail, healthcare, and libraries. I've taught Hapkido for over 20 years. I am currently single and retired from marriage. Now I'm a fledgling writer. From time to time, I'll read some of my pieces, both fiction and nonfiction, and time permitting, I might tell some jokes that I've heard in the past. I like to keep these under 20 minutes. I'll post stuff every week, so please like, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to purchase my works, I have some things over at Smashwords, or you can email me at al_simon@hotmail.com, and I'll send you a complete list of all my prices and works. If you order from me, I go through PayPal. If you need more flexibility with your transactions, then go through Smashwords. However, not all my material is on Smashwords. That being said, let me tell you a story. This is called You Can't Pick Your Neighbors. It's essentially chapter 1 of my book. Oh crap, it's terrible to go blank on that. Nothing happens in Dead Moines, or it might be under Dead Moines. That's at Smashwords, and again, you could also get it from me. Again, this is chapter 1. This is going to be at least maybe 4 or 5 segments. So, having said that, let me tell you a story. You can't pick your neighbors. Darren and Rita lived in the 1200 block of 10th Street right off University in Des Moines. In the 50s and early 60s, many of the homes were Jewish middle class. By the mid-60s to early 2000s, it became majority African American. There was a dirt alley that separated Darren's home, and especially the garage gym where he lived from the house across. Let me rephrase that. There was a dirt alley that separated Darren's home, and especially the garage gym where he lived from the house across the alley. Although raising livestock was banned from the city, some homes still had chicken coops and small sheds. The house across the alley had an oversized shed that once housed pigs. It faced a large yard, mainly used for parking for the 2-storied house that housed all the apartments. Darren never paid much thought to the shed or to the house until Cujo began barking at him. He only knew the dog's name, a Shar-Pei Pit Bull mix, because its owners were named Britt and would yell at the dog to be quiet. Cujo was tethered to the yellow-painted, dilapidated shed by a metal braided chain attached to a spike hammered into the ground by the shed. The shed had some recent adornments, albeit primitive. A sturdy door to the entrance, which was always padlocked. South of the door was a small hole where Cujo slept and was able to get out of the elements. Hay was strewn about the hole and extended a few feet from the shed. Scattered around the shed were discarded McDonald's sacks and fries. By the looks of it, McDonald's seemed to be a good part of Cujo's diet. From what Darren could discern, especially by the piles of feces around the shed, little attention was paid to the dog, and it looked like he was only there to warn owners if someone drove up. Dealers, Darren surmised, and put it out of his mind. In his neighborhood, one learned to live and let live, as long as boundaries weren't crossed. Right away, Darren said, "You ain't barking at me all the time." On his next trip to Costco, he bought a case of canned cat food. At first, he dumped the contents on a paper plate and slid it within reach of the dog. "Come on, Cujo. Darren's got some nummies for you." Once the dog ate, he'd snare the plate with a pole. This went on for a week until the dog got to recognize Darren and would run to meet him. Once Darren felt he was being looked at and drew his attention to the house. Once he looked that way, he saw blinds being dropped from what he assumed was the kitchen to the ground floor apartment. He'd give Joe, he didn't like the Cujo connotation, so he ended up calling the dog Joe, a can every day. Once when the dog got acclimated to him, Darren would sit up against the shed and let the dog nestle his muzzle on his thigh. During the winter months, Darren would look out his window from his garage loft and would only see Joe come out of his shed to bark at cars that would pull in and leave within a half hour. On bitterly cold nights and after 11 p.m., when the traffic to the apartment died down, Darren would go to the shed and call, "Here, Joe." He'd unfasten the dog from his chain and take him into his gym. Rita liked dogs and grew up with them as a child, where Darren had not. However, once she heard him say, "It's a disgrace how they treat that dog." "Why won't you call the city?" she asked. Darren gave her a look. He paused before speaking. "If this was the white middle-class neighborhood you grew up in, sure. If I did, it would cause more problems than it's worth. And they've seen me with their dog." Even as he said this, he knew he had crossed a line. A confrontation with the dealers living in the house behind him was inevitable. One day he was driving behind a beat-up Ford truck as he was heading home through the alley. The Ford swerved right as Darren pulled to the left to park in front of his gym. Joe, as dogs are wont to do, surged out of his house and ran to his owners as far as the chain would allow. However, he stopped in his tracks once he saw Darren emerge from his car. Darren merely looked that way to see Joe. Seeing the two that got out of the truck was incidental. The man was pot-bellied, probably in his 40s, and had more than a 5 o'clock shadow. Long, thick hair that was black and silver. Disheveled could be one way to describe him. White trash could be another. The boy beside him was at least a teenager. He was thin and rangy looking. Even if Joe was not in the picture, Darren knew he would not like either of them. The three assessed each other. Uppity nigger was uppermost in their minds. However, the eldest allowed a slight smile and nodded. The smile lacked any warmth. It was just a practice phony exercise. Darren couldn't hear what they were saying. They were a good 100 feet away. Darren nodded to himself and began to head into his home. "Get down," the older said, and before Darren could fit his key into the lock, he heard Joe yelp. Darren froze in his stead. He felt his insides churning. He knew he needed to let it go, that it was none of his business, that he'd be upsetting the apple cart. Fuck it. He turned to see Joe cowering at the feet of the older man and was exposing his belly to him. "Say, man." Both men turned to look at Darren. "Can I help you?" The voice was gravelly from years of smoking. Darren was cognizant that he was standing his ground. He didn't want to appear any more aggressive than necessary. "You have to hit a chained dog?" "Can't say that it's any of your business." The man also held his ground and turned to face Darren. "My boy says you've been feeding Cujo some food. You know you can get a dog of your own at the pound. And you can give the dog away if you don't want to take care of it." The older man slowly pulled aside his denim jacket. Underneath his tucked flannel shirt, Darren could see the butt of a .38 caliber pistol tucked into the man's pants. "Like I said, I can't see how any of this is your fucking business, neighbor. He spat out the last word and turned and went into the house. Okay, I'm going to close it for here. And again, please like, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to purchase my works, I have things at Smashwords, or email me at al_simon@hotmail.com, and I'll send you a complete list and prices of all my works. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get Al out of the ghetto, and I'll close with this. You load 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.